Hey everybody, I'm joined by Beezmohun, who is a fantastic 3D and 2D motion designer who has the privilege of working with Bugatti, BMW, and more. He currently works with Google as well. Super exciting, Ash, to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Grant, as always.
Ash, I got a big question for you, man. So you probably see reels after reels and so forth. Talk to me. What do you look for in a reel? What makes a good reel?
So I think it depends because, if we just to sort of like top line it to begin with, when I do hire in drives and stuff, like I see a lot of content, like loads. And what I look for to begin with is something that's short. Like I don't have time to sit through hundreds and hundreds of reels, right? Like I know that sounds very pretentious, but at the end of the day, when you're seeing, 80, 100 different designers kind of work, you're looking for something that's, got a level of brevity to it where ultimately I'm seeing, if I see something incredible in the first sort of 30 seconds, great. But generally, I look for something that's around 30 to 45 seconds long, front-loaded with seriously heavy-hitting content. Like stuff that really makes me stop and go, "Whoa, hang on a minute." So that's that's where I start from. And then I like to see a good range of stuff. So I want to see people who know how to work with animated type. Type's really big these days. I like to see people who have a broad range of sort of skills. So if I see people doing good roto work, I see people doing good motion design that has strong foundational design sort of elements, great. But from there, it's kind of I like to just see people's personality come through their work, so it's not just about all of the sort of client stuff. I know that's really big and it's nice to have those names, but I like to see people who are having fun by themselves, they're doing stuff that's them, not just we all do client work, right? We've all worked for a business, an agency or somebody, but I want to see stuff that tells me that you're you, not just that stuff, which is kind of what I encourage people to do. But yeah, generally I look for short stuff, engaging stuff, and I look for a wide sort of gamut of skill, basically.
Awesome. So what is a consistent challenge that you see in reels where you feel like in general it's kind of consistent that people tend to miss the mark at?
So I think some of the things that I see that don't really land that well, definitely when people kind of go on too long. So I've definitely seen some stuff where minute and a half, I know it doesn't sound like a long time, but I've seen stuff where it's a minute and a half and a lot of it's filler. I'd rather see less work but good work than I'd rather see a lot of kind of average work, which sounds again quite horrible, but at the end of the day, that is it. You're trying to sell yourself, right? We're trying to put out the best version of you, and you have X amount of time to make me actually engage with that. So if I'm seeing a lot of stuff, one of the big ones, I don't know if you know of this one, but I know when the School of Motion sort of there's that intro to After Effects course, whatever. I think for a while there was one that was a chainsaw or some sort of basically we can tell, right, as sort of seniors and people that are in the industry, when you see tutorial work. And hypocritically, I'm guilty of the same, right? I have a lot of tutorial work that I have put in previous reels, but the thing is, and the trick here is to do it before anyone else has done it. So the first 3 people that maybe put their School of Motion work in their show reel, they're probably fine, nobody else knew. But now, if you see it, you know it. And seeing that kind of stuff is just an instant turn off. I'm like, look, I get that you've done a tutorial, I get that you've done a course, but show me how you interpreted it. Don't just put the result of it in there. We see it a lot in the sort of online spaces we're in, where people kind of ask for feedback on stuff that they've done, but it's kind of tutorial led, and we're like, great, we were happy to provide that feedback, but show me how you took what you learn and interpreted it into a way that actually makes sense in terms of a different project or self kind of briefing almost. That's the kind of stuff that I prefer to see when it comes to that. But generally, stuff that's filler, stuff that's too long, stuff that's not relevant. That's the other one that I see a lot of, where people are applying to jobs and then they're showing me a skill set that doesn't matter at all or isn't relevant. That's one that's a big one. Also, people who, I think there's a lot of crossover between design and motion design. I understand that, fundamentally that's kind of where you start. You start with a good foundational knowledge of graphic design, and then you move into motion from there. That's how a lot of people I know have kind of moved into it, obviously. But it's when I've seen people submitting a PDF for a motion design role. I'm like, why are you submitting me a PDF? I can't see your stuff move. And the whole point of the role is I want to see motion, not static, So that's another one that kind of sort of gets my gourd a little bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. It's interesting that you bring up tutorial work being on reels because it's the chainsaw. I feel like is a bit infamous on reels. I see it a good bit on reels, and it's a pretty good indicator to me, honestly, that person might be a bit of a junior.
Exactly.
And maybe kind of fresh. And you're right. It's it's hard to look at tutorial work and get any indication how well they'll do in a commercial environment, creating commercial work. Because it's so handheld, you don't know what's already been created for them, things like that. We also see that a good bit on Rails when it comes to like 3D work, where I call it like tutorial porn, where it's a teaches you how to do something cool, but it doesn't teach you why it works the way it works.
That's it. That's exactly it. 100%. I want to know the why, and I want you to know the why. I don't want to see that you can just execute. That's like not it. That doesn't. That just tells me you can follow instructions, right? You can just push buttons when you're told to, not actively interpret that stuff and go, okay, now I know how to push the buttons, but how do I do it for me? What makes it work for my project, my brief, the contract the client has given me? Like, great, you can follow instruction, but then what? It's like, what happens after that? That's where I'm at.
Yeah. It also like disrupts the flow a good bit, because I've seen some reels where it'll be like pretty amateurish work for the most part. It's clear someone's a junior, they're learning. And then you'll get one piece that's like strangely way higher quality that's just in the reel all of a sudden, and it really throws you off, because then you're definitely like, I can't gauge this person's capabilities. Like, I don't know, this could be stuff from 5 years ago that looks bad, and now they have something good that's from 1 year ago. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, definitely, and this is another thing that I sort of like to tell people is like, please don't date your work. Like, people that put like the year on their show reel tells me, I'm like, right, okay, well, because we can go and do like a deep dive, and we can go look at it on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you're hosting a video, and we can see when you uploaded it, right? But most people, if they're smart enough, they'll like embed it on the website, and it's not like directly linking out to that. But if you put like showreel 2024 at the front, I'm like, okay, so you've just done it. If it says the year on it, I'm just like, right, but now you've dated your work, and therefore I'm going to assume that you did it this year or whenever the date on the showreel is. So I'm just a little bit like, well, don't do that, because I've seen some incredible, like, I still reference stuff that's like a decade old to people. I'm like, look, like, this is incredibly good work. It stands the test of time because it was good. But the moment that you say that, I did this in 2019, I'm like, okay. And like you said, like, how have you developed since then? What's new? Like, what's happened? Like, so I find, like, don't date your work ever. Like, it just irritates me to no end. I'm just like, why? Why are you doing this?
So we've had some pretty spicy takes on reels, I feel like, already. What is like your spiciest take on reels?
Oh, that's a really good question. Do you know what? I'm not even sure I have a spicier take than almost what we've just discussed, but I think more recently, actually, it's probably a generational thing, which sounds a little bit, harsh on the sort of younger artist, but it's very easy to tell when somebody's fresh, like really easy to tell. And people need to, I think there's a level of entitlement that a lot of younger artists might have. I don't think they all have it, but I think it does exist, and I understand why. But I think my sort of hottest take is that sometimes you need to know like where you are in the world, and you might be a junior, but you can't be applying for like a mid or senior position. There is an element of like you would have had to work for it to kind of get there. And people might not enjoy, like the fact that I'm saying this, but ultimately, like, I've just seen a lot of crap work that kind of begets the person, because I'm like, but you're a decent enough human being, and I like people, I love to love people, but I'm a little bit like, why am I seeing like crap from you, or why are you applying for something that's kind of above your station? Which again sounds harsh, but all here, it's been a difficult few years as well, post-COVID. Like, things have not gotten easier for a lot of people. I know so many freelancers who are still struggling to find work, that kind of thing, and they're great. And I'm sitting there going, okay, but you don't just walk into the, you don't just get in the ring and think you can box. That's kind of how it is, I think. So that's, I'm seeing a lot of like low-level content, being applied to, I suppose, high-level roles, and I'm sitting there like, don't do that. Like, I'd rather you be honest and be like, look, I am a junior, I'm not great, someone needs to help me. I much more appreciate that than just you, like I said, getting in the ring, putting on the gloves and thinking you can box, because you'll get knocked out like very quickly. The industry isn't the kindest, and that the wheat and chaff separation happens very quickly in a professional setting. That's what I think. So possibly not the spiciest take, but definitely a take.
I think that's pretty spicy, man. I think it also encompasses, to be honest, like the After Effects subreddit. I'm sure you go in there and see oftentimes where a junior will ask like a question that really kind of makes you scratch your head and go like, did you look at the effects panel? Like, did you like look this kind of stuff up? Yeah. Now, to play devil's counterpart here, I've also experienced the opposite of it, where I've seen some juniors who I'm like, these people perform a little bit better than even some seniors. And I do think when that occurs, the consistent trend I see is that those seniors never like continued to advance their skills. They got to a certain point, they kind of plateaued and they stopped like continuing to learn. And it's interesting because like I received a reel from a guy who teaches animation at a university. He was just looking for a different job, and his stuff was like from 10 years ago. At that time, 10 years ago, he was probably a fantastic animator. But now, carrying that over to motion design where he's at now and not really updating his skill sets, it was kind of rough to see that. I was like, man, this guy's gonna have a hard time finding a gig because like everything is so dated.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think you've actually sort of hit on something that I myself have felt a little bit lately, where it's sort of like professional stagnation. You kind of, I think you described it perfectly. Like the plateau is exactly what it is. I think it's and it's hard, right? Like it's difficult because you get to a point. I think there's an element of, ultimately, look, we're all here to try and make money. That's the bottom line, right? Everyone needs to live. You need to survive. You need to feed yourself. You need to look after family, kids, pets, whatever. But I think you have to know at which point you do want to actively stop, and whether you are actively stopping or if you are like repositioning yourself in the industry. Like with me, I've always said, like, look, like at a point I do want to be in sort of management, in lead roles, in senior sort of leadership. I didn't intend to, don't get me wrong, if like 16-year-old me saw me now, they would be like, what are you doing? Like, that's everything you're ever against.
Right.
The reality of the situation is that, like, that's the way the world works. And, unfortunately, like, to make more money, you kind of have to progress up the ladder. And I've completely subscribed to the corporate world of it. Like, I'm in it. So many people tell me, you've got enough skill to be like a great freelancer, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to do the admin. Like, I just can't be bothered with it, right? So it works out better for me to be under a company or with an agency than it is for me to be a freelancer. But yeah, you're completely right. Like, I'm guilty of it myself. I haven't, put enough time in to develop my skills in the technical sense. And I think this is what you're touching on. As you said, there are some seriously skilled juniors who are just technically gifted. I get that.
Yeah.
And the advent of the internet and social media and the ability to have information disseminated at such a rapid pace is one thing. But, you have to know whether or not you do want to kind of buck the trend or go up into that sort of leadership role and ultimately make peace with the fact that you are eventually not going to be on the tools anymore. And it sucks. It sucks so hard. Like I do miss like the ability to just sit and make something for fun because it's fun to do it. But what I enjoy more is the ability to mentor people, to lead people, to show them like the right path of creativity in a corporate setting, in a world that's, generally geared against them, because ultimately it's a race to the bottom, right? AI is kind of doing a whole load of stuff which is not making people happy. And there was definitely that moment where everyone was like, crap, am I out of a job? Like, because AI is like absolutely, runway, all of these other things coming out. But, I think to sort of go back to like a spicy hot take, I'm a bit like, well, if you don't know how to use the tool, then it's you that's the issue, not the tool. Like the tools are always, the people are always going to make stuff, right? There are scripts, plugins that do all sorts of stuff. The amount of people that I've seen do like a text box, right? Where people do, so it's like it will respond to the text that you put in it, and it's an expression that's like built in After Effects. I've seen like hundreds of them, and I've even bought them from friends because I'm like, I'd rather support you and give you, $5-10, whatever it is. Like, I don't mind spending money if it's somebody that I know who's done something, because I want to support their work. But there's so much of it, and I miss that sort of stuff. But I'm just a bit like, well, there's too much of it out in the world. I don't want to add to the sort of, I don't want to overpopulate with the same stuff. But at the same time, this is why I prefer kind of being in the management side and in the leadership side, where I can actually like navigate with people and help them find their fit. I think that's what it is for me, is helping other people more than it is actually being a true creative now, which sucks to admit, because like, I want to draw stuff. Like I go to car stuff all the time, and I take hundreds of, I've got my camera like right here, like, and I go out and I take like 600 photos. I'll post none of them. I've got people chasing me from a photo shoot I did back in 2016. It's 8 years later. They're like, where's the photos? I'm like, I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is interesting. Since moving up to the management role that I'm currently in now, I've really had to stop producing as much. And it got to the point where I think I went about a month without opening After Effects, and then I realized, I was like, oh, I haven't opened After Effects in like a month. I need to like do something. So I started doing like smaller projects to help out. And what I found was I reopened After Effects. I was like, I don't remember some things, like some really basic things. Like,
that's exactly it.
that I was like confusing parenting and the pick whips, everything. I was like, oh my god. Are you also getting like a lot of like graphic design portfolios you have to review as well?
Yeah, so I mean, in my current role, like without getting into too much of like what it is we do and how we do it, you know, I definitely need like static designers and motion designers. So, you know, the first person I actually looked for was a static designer. So I definitely do see some of that work, for sure. And I definitely have reviewed quite a few books or portfolios, whatever people want to call them. I've definitely seen that stuff. So yeah, to answer that question, definitely, I'm definitely still looking at a lot of static work, because again, it's the foundation of motion design. I think good design starts static and then we go into motion, but you can't have good motion without having a solid knowledge of why good design works. You know, like I mean, you can't see it due to the sort of filter, but like this whole like bookshelf behind me here, that's all like design books and, you know, inspiration stuff and some sort of legendary stuff, you know, how to become a good designer without losing your soul, I think it's called. There's a Michael Beirut book back there, The Illusion of Life, like, you know, the Designish one, the animator's survival kit, that's up there as well. So like, yeah, I definitely think design is, it's probably the most important thing to me. Like, I would rather, and I say this, and I feel like such a hypocrite, but I studied graphic design and I hated it when I studied it. You know, I did 3 years at uni and I'm forever grateful for the friendships that came out of it. I've got some lifelong friends as a result. You know, I spent 2 years living with a dude who's like one of my better friends now. If not for him, actually, I probably would have dropped out in my second year, but he was the one that convinced me to stay. But yeah, I see a lot of graphic design work, and I think it's really nice when I do see the stuff that makes me like stop, you know, like you see it on social media, right? Like one of the sort of buzz phrases that people use is like thumb stopping, right? Or scroll stopping. But when I actually see that stuff, I'm like, oh damn. And I'm not seeing it on Instagram and TikTok and that. I'm seeing it on PDFs when people send me great design work, and that makes me go, good God. Like, you know, there's a designer, I mean, she might not even see this because I don't think it's in her kind of wheelhouse, but, you know, she did one thing and it sticks out to this day to me, you know, which was when I was working with Mars Wrigley, and she did basically like meme level content for Extra Gum. And it was simply like a bust of Michelangelo blowing a bubble gum, like that just had the bubble there. And I was like, it's so simple, but it works so well. Like, that's been in my head for like literally years, you know, and that's annoyingly one of the best pieces of design that I've seen in a very long time. But it was just so simple. And I think this goes to a lot of like great projects. Like, if you look at the stuff that wins at like Cannes and stuff like that, it's a very simple idea executed perfectly. Like, you know, you take something and you run with it. Don't have a massive idea. My favorite one that came out of it, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it was by Orange in France, and they basically they used AI. I mean, they said AI. I think it was a lot more VFX than AI, but ultimately that was kind of the buzzword of it. And they showed all of these great football, or I suppose to use soccer moments, where they had all of these insane goals being scored, incredible like team play. And then you get halfway through and they go, you thought you were watching the men's football, but it's actually all of this was women's, and we replaced all of the women with men, like, you know, their faces and their heads and stuff, just to get you to watch it. And then we're going to show you the breakdown of actually this is the women's side, not the men's, like, you know. And so you suddenly go, oh, and the message there is like, look, if you support football, you support all of football, right? You support all of the players. It's not just men that dominate the sport industry. In fact, I would go as far as to say like the female, you know, the women that play, I feel like saying female is always a bit weird, but, you know, there's the women that sort of play in those sort of areas and who play those sports, like they're actually better, you know. In the UK, there's a phrase with football where it's like, it's coming home, right? And that's always applied to the men's. And when we were in the World Cup recently, there was a whole load of like, oh, we're going to do really well, and we invariably we do terribly, right? Like, it's a very British thing. We know that we're not going to win, so we get really far up, and then everyone's like, you know, national pride is at all-time high, and then we fall out at like, you know, the quarters of the semis, and you're like, oh great, what a surprise. But the women won the Euros like a couple of years before that, and it did come home because they did it. And so it's a really nice message to say, actually, if you're going to support sport, support all of it, not just the blokes, because that's not fair to the other people who deservedly like should be respected as part of it. So in my mind, I think it's really simple idea, executed really well, and and kind of just done with all of the right thought behind it, and not just kind of, you know, trying to do everything at once. That's kind of the stuff that I appreciate. Like I like to see really solid fundamental work than, you know, I don't want to see, like, great, if you manage to do a campaign that goes across, you know, out of home, social, whatever, good. But what's the idea? What's the baseline? You know, how do we abstract back far enough for you to tell me what the idea is, like a sentence? You know, that's kind of where I kind of exist.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I know we experienced on our end a little bit of the NBA and the WNBA. And so I definitely see that there. One thing I want to touch on that you talked about a little bit at the beginning of this point was talking about how motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but motion design for you is pretty much like the second step from graphic design. You go from graphic design and go to motion design. I think that's really interesting, especially because like I've also seen it where video editors start doing motion design, and it's like a very drastic difference in journey for them. Feels like they have to learn composition, all these kind of things that they really didn't have to learn before, things like that. So it's an interesting challenge. Have you noticed that at all on your end as well?
To be fair, like it's a good point to raise, because I don't think I've noticed it consciously, but now that you kind of sort of bring it to my attention, I think you are right. There's definitely like a noticeable difference between like those who came from like design versus video. And I'm always curious, like, as to why, because obviously people that are like video editors, like they have like a solid visual, like, you know, if you point a lens at something, they understand that composition. But when it comes to like adding in those extra elements, you know, like even if it's a lower third or whatever, like suddenly there's a very different mindset, and it's almost like they're having to learn a whole new skill, but it's based on something they thought they knew. Yeah. But working with video, I think, is very like, here's a great shot, that one works, da-da-da. When it comes to like motion design, you're having to think about what to add. You're having to kind of build on something. You're kind of having to, you know, put a few more bells and whistles on something that might just be a video. And ultimately, like, motion design doesn't even have to be a video, right? It can, as in like shot footage is what I mean, not like, you know, because it will be a video. But, you know, I think there's an element of like, you could do something without ever needing to use footage in motion design. And I think that's what might trip them up. I think, you know, because I think there are some, like, there's a guy that I recently worked with. I've been trying to steal him for work that I, you know, he's one of my favorite people to work with. And he was like one of my, it's that classic, like when you're doing a hiring drive and you find the person, and I always like to try and draw out the hiring process as long as possible, because ultimately there will be somebody, and without fail, it's the last person that you interview, you know, like generally, or you give enough time for, you know, a few more people to come through. And if I hadn't waited a couple of extra weeks for, you know, X, Y, or Z, I would not have found like these super talented, really incredible, really passionate creatives. You know, because I could have just gone, oh, we've got 2 weeks to find someone, let's just do it. You know, that's not the way I like to think. I'm like, yeah, okay, we might have 2 weeks to find someone, but do we just want to put someone in the hot seat who can just execute, or do we want an actual creative who, you know, thinks, breathes, lives it, you know, really wants to, you know, push the envelope of what they do. And I've been privileged enough to be in that position to decide, you know, who we bring on many times now, and without fail, they've always been great. I think, you know, I've never been displeased with them. You know, it takes a little bit of time for people to get off the ground, and, you know, every start in a new company is a bit rocky. But those people that I had the decision of hiring, I think I've always made like the right decision, because they ultimately proved themselves to just be like just stunning, just such beautiful people in terms of like the work they do, the ability, the attitude, you know, all of those sorts of things.
I would imagine that sometimes you find a designer who you're like, this is the person, like, I know this is going to be the person, this is the right person for the team, but they're asking for more than what the budget allows. So how do you go about communicating value to other people that, hey, you know, like, it's worth the money, it's worth upping the budget for this person?
So that's an interesting one, because actually to date, we've not really had that kind of issue. And I think because I've had the privilege of working with some of the, you know, clients that I've worked with over the years, I actually find it the other way, where people are a little bit willing to meet the budget expectations because of the name associated with it, not because, you know, I have to go higher. I think if we were to, you know, because this is effectively a hypothetical for me, I think when I see that good creative, when I see the value in somebody, I will fight for them. You know, I think like I will definitely take it up to my managers, my seniors, and sort of say, well, look, like, this person's great. You know, like, we are going to be missing out on something like phenomenal if we don't go for that person. And obviously that's part of, you know, again, being in that sort of senior leadership, you know, higher up position, you know, you have to go to bat for the right people. And that's not to say that there are loads of wrong people at all. Obviously not everyone's the right fit for the right role, but at the same time, I'm just a little bit like you said, like, you just know. I don't even know how you know, but there's just that innate, like, that's the person. Like, it just clicks. You know, my most recent hire, actually, you know, she was that person where there was, potential concern, over her as an individual. But I was like, I've seen the work. Something that she did that actually blew me away, because I did not expect it. But I actually did the same thing when I was interviewed for my role. Where she made a presentation and she like took me through her work in the interview. I didn't ask her to do that, but it was such a good way of kind of codifying like who that person is, like what they're good at, why they're good at it, showing me their creative journey as well. It was just, it really like warmed my heart as a, as her potential senior at the time, because I was like, not only are you showing up, but you've taken enough time to show up like in a way that I hadn't expected. And if you surprise me in an interview, that's a really good thing. Like that's not guaranteed the role, but you're definitely going to be in my sort of top 10 for sure, like 100%. So that was just a really nice thing to happen, I guess.
It's always interesting to get like something like a presentation or something unique, like a unique PDF or something like that, when you're looking at even like static graphics and just kind of seeing it. It does a good job of standing out. So just the curated typical like we'll say like, we'll use static graphics as an example, where it's like the first 3 pages is like brochures, the next 2 pages are logos. It's just very like segmented, and you're like, okay, like I don't really get the person's taste though. Like I get the person's work, but I don't get the person's like vibe. Yeah,
no, I get you. I think just to sort of pivot briefly back, because I feel like I didn't really answer the sort of budget question properly, but I think if it is the right person, and usually the right people come with a really broad range of skills as well. They're not just a motion designer, but they're a fairly consummate graphic designer, or they know a bit about 3D or whatever. And if I do see that skill and I do see that talent, I will argue for it. I mean, actually, I think the guy that I was just speaking about, I think he actually might have been one of those people that wanted a little bit more, because ultimately, I think in my experience, when people do want that extra bit, it's because we have a bracket, we have a range. We say that we're looking for, just to pull some numbers out the air, and these aren't real numbers. So if anyone's watching this, like, don't take this seriously. But in the sense of, say, we're going to put a job out, and in the UK we might say, oh, it's 40 to 45,000 pounds. We might be looking at people who come in on the lower end, and we might be looking at people that come in on the higher end, but generally, like, they understand what the bracket is. So if they think they're worth it, they'll kind of push for the higher end of it. Rarely have I had anyone that kind of, like we're saying 45 is the top, and they're coming in like, I want 55. Like it's very rare for that to happen, because again, this goes back to a little bit of knowing your station and like knowing where you are in the kind of world. Whether like if a junior came in and was like, oh, I want 55 grand, in the nicest way, they'd probably get laughed at and kind of not considered, because you're like, okay, but you're not worth 55 grand in the nicest possible way. You're very early on in your journey, and on a technical level, like, sure, people are skilled, but that it means nothing for soft skills. Like I don't know how you work in a professional setting. I don't know how you work with people. I don't know if you're going to turn up to the office like barely dressed. Like, I just don't know you yet. So that's where the sort of money comes into it, where you don't have enough of a history for me to viably gauge like who you might be or how you might act, for example, which again as a very subjective thing that's quite harsh for me to kind of say, but ultimately that is the bottom line, and that's what I think a lot of people aren't willing to actively say, but that is the truth.
All right, let's switch this up a little bit. Let's jump on a different topic here. What's your favorite project you ever worked on?
Ah, man, that is a really good... No one's ever asked me that, I think. Or at least not on video. But, damn. Ah, man, yeah, Grant, you've really got me there. I think it will be... So, obviously you're part of Motion Collabs as well. And we do that stuff. And Laura's great. Like, I mean, I really love the fact that she's put that community together and working with Stephen and Bent as well. Like, it's great to kind of have that community space. I think a lot of my favorite projects revolve around like a community aspect, but it was the title sequence for Clue that we did. I think I like it so much because I surprised myself by doing something that like I love title sequences, right? Like Art of the Title is one of my most referenced websites. Like when I tell people to look at stuff, I'm like, go look at this thing, because a title sequence is meant to like encapsulate an entire show or film or whatever in a short space of time, right? It's almost like the title sequences are the show reel for what you're about to watch. And this is why I like short, succinct stuff. But when I see a really good one, I'm really into it. And with that Clue one, I put in way more effort than I thought I would. I think I'm generally the sort of like, do my homework at the last minute type of person. And I did. I left it a little bit late. But as you say, in the sort of general, like in the general sense of being a generalist to a degree, I was just pulling on anything for free that I could get, right? I was on Sketchfab, just like pulling like models and stuff and just grabbing all of them and just slapping them in. And And there is something to be said for someone who isn't like, I would love to learn how to model, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know how to do it, I just don't, I think I'm too lazy to care about actually having to do it. And that's why when I see like your work or other people's work and like some of the stuff that people submit for motion collabs, I'm like, good God, like what the hell? Like that's crazy good. And then there's me just like, 3D model there, camera here, like quick little lighting bit, so that's probably the one that I think it's my favorite, because I think it's the thing that I'm quietly, well, not anymore, but it's the one that I was the most proud of without kind of telling anyone about it. But I think it just looked really good. It felt high fidelity. It ticked all of the boxes that I leverage against other people when I judge their work. And putting myself on the spot for a moment, that was me going, oh wow, actually, hang on a minute, like I can do good stuff, and it was also at a point where I think I was sort of transitioning out of kind of being on the tool so much and like more into the management side. So that's where I was like, I've still got it. Like I still feel good about like being able to do good work. And while it like relied on a lot of free stuff and relied on kind of me just grabbing whatever I could from the internet, like sure, but it kind of filled a hole that I didn't know I had. It worked, and I was pleased with it, and it looked great, and the feedback was great. And obviously, we're being judged by our peers and our fellow kind of creatives. So for the people that I highly respect to come out and say really nice stuff about something that I felt wasn't really worth it, not as in like, it was obviously worth it to do it, but as in for me, I didn't invest enough energy into it. It was like a really nice moment for me. I was like, damn, okay, I can do good stuff. Like I am great. Like, it was a real nice stroke of the ego, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I really like about motion collabs, outside just the general networking, is it feels like a real safe space to be able to experiment and explore new things, and to understand that I feel like I'm never going to get bashed for anything I make in there, but I might receive some strong critique or something like that, which is good. But in general, it feels like I can make something, put out there, to be proud of it, and it's supported. That's what I really like about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I love to, like I said, I love people. Like I love meeting new people all the time, whatever. But I think like motion collabs is one of those spaces like that. We're doing something in the UK now where, ultimately, Grant, like when I don't, because I'd like to sort of see people, I love to arrange meeting up with people. So that's kind of where, we started doing like motion meetups through the After Effects Discord, so, the one that's linked off the subreddit. So started doing meetups based on the fact that, I knew all of these people in the UK. I was like, yeah, but I've never met any of you, so let's do that. And now it turns out there was a bigger motion design thing that happened pre-COVID, and then it kind of obviously got put on pause due to COVID. And then off the back of that, without my knowledge, there was a couple of other kind of motion meetups happening, and it's just turned into us like kind of all forming like one big thing now under the banner of London Motion. But I think it's really nice that we have those creative spaces where we can just be, a little bit freer to be creative. There's less professional judgment in the sense of this isn't got like 150 million budget behind it. This is just you doing something nice for yourself. And you have to hold yourself accountable. And I think that's something that like people really struggle with, myself included, holding myself accountable to doing stuff. I've got one of my best friends is like, he's got a band, he wants me to do a logo for him. I've been putting it off, not because I don't want to do it, just because I'm not in that creative headspace of like doing that stuff. So it's been a real challenge to like revert and kind of actually get back into being creative when you're, like I said, not on the tools as much. And
I'm sure that also leads to, like the After Effects vibe where you open up like a program and you're like, I don't remember what this does.
100%. Like, one of my biggest bugbears is that like Cinema 4D has such a great MoGraph module. Like it's the thing that sets it apart from every other 3D software, right? Like, you can hack stuff in Blender, and I love Blender for the fact that it's free and it's open source, but it doesn't just do what Cinema 4D does. Like Cinema 4D is before the big UI update, which made it look more like Blender, it felt like home. You could go into that 3D software, you'd click and hold on a tool and it would like pop out the various other ones, and it felt very similar to like the Adobe economy of like the way that the UI works. So you'd naturally feel at home with it. But I have not touched Cinema 4D in literally years now, because I used to just rely on the company to pay for it, whichever agency I was working at. I was like, I need Cinema 4D. 9 out of 10 times we barely use it, but it was always nice to have as something that we could tinker with and explore ideas in, test stuff, make stuff, concept stuff. But I haven't touched it in forever. And I feel like now I'm being left behind. You know, I'm just like, oh God, the herd is kind of getting way far ahead of me. And I'm just here just tinkering in my free like Blender software. And, you know, I've got people who are using them off and they're like, get real software, you know, get adult software. I'm like, shut up, man. Like, you know, you can do good stuff in Blender. We've proven we can do good stuff in Blender. So yeah, no, I definitely get that point.
I think that's really interesting because regardless of how someone may feel like for or against like stuff like NFTs, that 2020 period where we saw like NFTs really start to pop off, it felt like a lot of 3D artists began to really make advancements on what they were doing visually and so forth. And like I'll see some work from like David Aru, and I'm just like, man, I know if OpenSea 4D, I ain't gonna be doing that. Like 100%. It just ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, definitely, dude. 100%.
Online, you have various tags such as Beezmohun 1964. How did you get those tags?
Interesting. So, I think 1964 is my. It's not. No, it is my favorite story. I'm going to lie a little bit. It's my favorite online handle story, if you want. So there's a couple of things before I get into this. First of all, I hate it when people change their handles on social. Like I have always had some sort of variation of 1964 as part of my online handles. So that actually comes from cars, funny enough, weirdly. So, you know, spinning the wheel of time back a few decades at this point, when I was 14, you know, as a young Asian male in the UK, lowriders are the furthest thing away from what we have, right? Like it's only recently have there been more of them here. So as a 14-year-old kid, I don't know what it was, but lowriders just got me. They captured the spirit of so much for me because it's an art form in cars itself. The amount of effort people put into having a lowrider is nuts to me. And as a kid, I was really into them, really wanted one, still do want one. So at the time, Lowrider magazine was the place to be. Back in the days of forums and like V-Bulletin board and that kind of stuff. And I managed to get the handle 1964 on the Lowrider magazine forum. Now, the most popular lowrider of all time, I might be speaking out of turn, but I don't think so, is the 1964 Chevrolet Impala. And I was shocked that I could get that handle on that website, knowing that like it was what it was. And it's just stuck. It's just stuck. So everywhere, you know, before I was in the After Effects server and whatever, like I was on car forums, right? And car forums are always the place I'd be. And that was my handle. You know, it just came from the Lowrider magazine forum. I then joined Civic Life when I bought a Honda Civic and you know, I was getting into cars. And that was my handle there. So that's where 1964 came from. And I've just stuck with it. I don't know why, but it's just the easiest thing to run with. And then Beezmo, it's a weird one because I don't think many people used it. Not many people call me that, except for one dude. And he was the one that gave me that nickname back in university. A guy that I lived with in university accommodation. And he just called me Beezmo. And it stuck to me, like I took it on. And thus now it's the, you know, the moniker that I kind of like style myself by, but I don't really use it heavily. It was just easy. The URL was there, you know, no one had bought it. There is a guy who has the .com and I know when his, when it expires and every year.
You're waiting.
Yeah. I have a reminder on my phone annually, invariably, because he's in the States, he's in your side of the pond. And, it's like always at like 3 a.m. and I'm never awake to like feel it from under him. Because there's going to be like a 30-second window, right, before the water renew kicks in on his end. And I'm just like, I need it, but I don't want it. I just, but the .co.uk like signifies that, you know, I'm a Brit, you know, I'm from here. You know, I love the UK, like it's my favorite place in the world. Nothing compares to London. But, you know, that's where those two came from, you know. So 64 comes from the car world. Beezmo came from one person giving me a shit nickname, which is actually the first 6 letters of my last name, if you look at it. Yeah. If you just take the Hun off, you know, so that's where it came from. But he's genuinely the only person that calls me that, which is hilarious because it stuck for so long, and that's what I style myself as.
The 1964 backstory was far more intriguing than I thought it was going to be like, you know, I played RuneScape back in the day, and that was the username. But that's cool. So it's like a legacy title in a way from like where he claimed like the pretty signature online name on a car for him and just kind of kept it. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's cars are integral to like my personality, my being. So yeah, it's crazy to me still that I've managed to get it then. Every now and then I try to use Wayback Machine and see if I can access a version of the forums, you know, that existed before. But unfortunately, those days are long gone. So it's sad, but you know, corporate culture does screw over the good things in life, unfortunately.
Is that still your favorite car? Or do you have a new car you're all in on?
No, I mean it's the dream. In fact, I'm looking at, you can't see it, but behind the screen is a not an original, it's a reprint, but it's the ad of the car from the year. You know, it's a 64 Impala. I'll see if I can, I'm not quite sure. I'll take a photo of it and send it to you so you can see it. But this is literally what sits behind, and amusingly right below it is a postcard of a lowrider as well. But yeah, it's just, it's up there for sure. Like, it is by far and away my dream. You know, I'd love to be, my end goal was to drive a lowrider down Oxford Street, the most famous street in London, presumably, and just scrape the bumper along, just, you know, like pumping out some like classic 90s hip hop, some MF Doom or something, but just everybody looking, that's me. Like, I want to be the center of attention in a stupid ass car in the middle of London. And what's great is that I know people that have lowriders that have done that, and I've been there when they've done it, or, you know, I've been out there. But that's the dream. A 1992 Nissan Skyline GTR is up there as well, and then my current car, which is currently suffering the fate of rotting away, which is actually a 1999 or 2000 plate Honda Civic Coupe, which, as I said, I do own, but it is slowly rotting away on my mother's driveway, just because it's not financially viable to have it where I live currently. So it's just kind of sort of out of sight, out of mind for the time being. But those are the top three. Obviously, there are loads more. I'm a car guy. I love cars. There are so many cars we could talk about. We would be here for hours.
Create a playlist. What kind of music gets you pumped up when you begin work?
Ooh, good one. It depends on where I'm at in the work. In terms of, you know, if I've got a lot to do. So I very much from, you know, like the UK, we had garage and grime. They're very intrinsic to like UK culture. It's almost like a subculture of UK music, but it all sort of started there. So I think my first and biggest love is grime music. It's just very aggressive for what it needs to, like, it's basically just men yelling stuff at each other in an aggressive manner, kind of derivative from like hip hop and rap, but it's our thing. So grime is kind of where I like to base myself, but being honest, it's always drum and bass. Like, drum and bass is really what gets me going. Like, if I've got a lot of stuff to do, I've got like the electronic music pumping. I'll also get into this sort of weird mindset where I'll be listening to like the same 5 songs like back to back to back to back to back for like a week. And I'm sure my other half just, like, you know, she'll probably just hate the fact that sometimes I'm up at like 7 a.m, bumping like banging D&B, you know, for no reason other than like the song's just like, it's an earworm, it's just stuck in my head. So it's definitely always drum and bass. I think we go back to our classics, you know, the roots of like rap, R&B, hip hop, that kind of stuff. You know, MF Doom, very big, absolute gutted. He was one of my bucket list people to see, and then unfortunately he passed away. But yeah, it always comes back to drum and bass. Don't know why, but I think it's just that's the thing that really gets me going. You know, there's a few mainstays. You know, there's you've also got the likes of sort of like Pendulum, who actually we're going to go see in December. They're doing like
they're still touring? I thought they stopped touring.
Well, we actually saw them live on their own a little while ago, earlier this year, and then they're now there's an event with them, Nero as well, Knife Party. So like seriously heavy hitters. So I was just like, that's can't miss out on that. You know, I unfortunately missed out on Nero did a little album launch party recently, which I missed out on, and I was gutted because it was like one of my toxic traits is like triple booking myself like every week, and I've got like always got like 2, 3, 4 things to do, and I'm always like bouncing around between plans, you know. So it's kind of one of those things where I was like, that was that day where I was like, I had something else to do. No one else wanted to go with me. I've hit that kind of point now where I'm like, I don't care if people don't want to go with me. I'll happily go out to an event by myself. I'm old enough and I don't care enough, so I'm just like, whatever. But I just
era, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see Spore live. I think he started producing music again.
Spore is wicked.
Yeah. He did that excursion for a while, didn't feed me, and then I think he's back doing Spore now, which is awesome. He put out some new stuff I think earlier this year. And then who is it? Two Fingers. I think it's Two Fingers.
Oh yeah. I like to.
Yeah. Check out some Two Fingers, things like that. So we gotta trade music, man. You get some of your tunes, and I'll send you some of mine, stuff like that.
I'm literally copying my playlist to send to you now, like right this second, just because.
Oh, you got a whole play. I just got a like songs playlist, man. I don't have it that deep.
Oh, I mean, I have a like songs playlist, but it's 9,068 songs strong right now because I I categorize stuff very broadly, like. The rap and hip hop stuff, I just call it beats 2024, D&B, dubstep and electro 2024, chill 20, like, so I just don't have any, like, I'm not getting into the nitty gritty of, you know, is this, you know, this particular type of subgenre. I'm like, if I like it and it fits into this wide bucket in the playlist, it goes done.
That's fair. That's fair. You say you listen to some rap too. Is it like older school rap, or you listen to some newer stuff like Shake Well?
Yeah, definitely older stuff. You know, as sort of being a 90s baby, I think I kind of grew up in that sort of twilight era of just really cool stuff. You know, the Pac, Biggie, Doom, obviously, Tribe Called Quest, you know, all of like Wu-Tang, obviously, we can't not forget about Wu-Tang, it's for the kids. You know, and it's been Nas as well, obviously, you know, one of the best rappers of all time, in my opinion. But when it comes to newer stuff, I think probably the most modern that I'd get is, it's got to be Kendrick. I mean, Kendrick has just been slapping down Drake, and I've been thoroughly enjoying that. Like, it's got to the point where I don't even think, like, one thing to be clear about here, right, is I love drama. Like, drama in the music industry is great for me because it breeds more, right? It makes more music. So, like, you had it here with Stormzy, who's, like, massive now. You know, he was a kind of relative unknown. Came out of nowhere and then started beefing with, like, one of the grime scene's, like, forefathers, as it were, a guy called Wiley. And just, it was like back to back to back for a few weeks, right? There was just song after song after song, and everyone was on tenterhooks, like, when are they replying? Like, is it today? Is it like, when's the next tune gonna drop? Like, that's how I feel. Like, you know, with Kendrick and Drake, I'm like, good. And Kendrick is just gifted. My God, that man can spit bars, and like, just the fact that he's just not letting that dog die. He's going after Drake. He put out another diss track. It felt like for no reason. Like, just went after Drake again, and I was just like, I love you, man. Like, you are propelling music. Like, regardless of what the beef is, you know, like, it's nuts. Like, he's affected, like, the social culture of music just by virtue of having an issue with somebody else. And I just love that, you know, like, I think, yeah, but, you know, Kendrick is definitely more on the more recent time. There are a lot of, like, British rappers and artists that I follow, like, a little bit more, who I would argue are, you know, like, it's crazy that there are people that are younger than me that are so prolific. I'm just like, what the hell? Like, you know, you're 22, you're putting out bangers, and I'm here, you know, at my old age, just like, okay, well, you know, I'm doing nothing with my life, sort of thing.
Dude, I feel on a spiritual level. I'll see some people like, there's a guy named, like, his artist name was like IMJQ or something like that. He's like 22 or something, puts out some baller music, has a large following. He looks like on Spotify, everything. And I'm just looking at him, I'm like, man, I remember the first time I opened up Fruity Loops. It wasn't like that.
Well, I mean, like, I genuinely, like, I have like a launch key, like a, you know, 49 key thing that I have been meaning to make music with, because I just, like, electronic music gets me so good, that I was like, I should just try and get into it. And I you know, I love to tap, and, you know, I love to, like, bounce my knees and stuff, probably have ADHD and, you know, getting assessed for that soon. But I was just like, I want to have one of those little beat pads, you know, like Fred again, like, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I used to play piano many moons ago. So I was like, that's a natural thing. But classically, you know, all of the toys and none of the time. So all I've ended up doing is having it and using it like 3 times. I got friggin' Ableton Live 11, spent the money for that. One of my other buddies, actually Ramon, who is the guy that made the After Effects server on Discord, like, he sent me a course and was like, do it, it's like 60 quid. I was like, sweet. Got halfway through it, put it down, lost the tack, you know. But yeah, I mean, music, man, it's just great. I mean, one of the other things I love recently, I'm not sure if you know, but so the other day, Deep Blue Sea was on Netflix, right? Popped up, really dumb. Like, I love it. It's such a dumb movie, right? It's just all of it, everything about that film is just stupid in all hell. That's what makes it good. LL Cool J as the chef, and then 2 days later, LL Cool J drops a whole new album, The Force. And I was like, what? Like, of all of the times, so I have watched the film and then LL Cool J coming back, like, and there are some big, like, Nas is on it, Eminem's on it. I'm like, what?
Wow.
Like, what the hell? Like, where did you come from? And, you know, like, Rick Ross and Fat Joe are on it. Like, you know, I think that's taking it. Buster's on it. Like, I'm just looking at it now. I'm just like, holy shit, man! Like, you came back out of nowhere. Snoop is on the first song on the album. It's crazy. But yeah, man, music. Oh, love it. I couldn't live without it.
All right, everybody, that was Ash Beezmohun, a fantastic 2D and 3D motion designer who's a design lead right now working on various projects. So make sure to go check him out at beezmo.co.uk. Find him on Instagram as well and LinkedIn. Ash, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Yeah, no, Grant, honestly, really worth it. I think we had a really good discussion, hit on a lot of really important things. I can only extend my thanks back to you, man. Like, this has been a genuine pleasure. I'd be so up for doing more of this or sending more people your way if you want them. And obviously, you know, you have my support and the support of others like me.